Google this.
Oh, good morning. It's Nickala at Flourish Together here. We're just getting started with our event over at the Village Web Company in Romiley, and today is all about finances and financial systems and pricing. Basically, at the start of the year, we wanted to make sure that people can take the fear out of finance, really, and all have a good think about what we're trying to achieve with our social ventures, or whether we're starting out or we're evolving through the year ahead. We've got a great panel. I'm going to hand back to Shelley in a second. It was just wishing people Happy New Year. Great to have a good room full and be thinking about telling everybody about Heaton Chapel station development, which we will do more later, but it's just to flag up. We're likely to be opening our little social enterprise work hub around April, May. Which is kind of exciting. Yeah, no, it's been a good year and more, nearly 18 months work behind the scenes, but we're getting there now. You'll hear more about that. And yeah, anything else that we need to share, we can share a bit later, really. So just thanks for being here, and yeah, enjoy the session. Hope you get lots from it.
Thanks, Karen. And I'm Shelley. I'm from Flourish as well. I think I've met most of you. Right, so I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves first and just say who you are, your organisation, and just briefly your interests and experience in this topic. Rachel.
My name is Rachel. I set up the Old Abby Taphouse, and I'm one of the co-directors there, and I also work for Flourish CIC, which is like a community tech platform. My interest in finance, how we started off was doing events and selling tickets. So what I got really good is building websites and selling tickets, and events is really good for working out budgets, because you have to work out how much you sell and break even. And so I think that is the start for our business as a pub.
Without money, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Without knowing how to predict it a little bit, you can't do it.
Definitely. And then I think my other interest is probably I'm a bit scared of murderers, so I watch a lot about fraud and tax evasion, and I think that really helps when you're running a business. Go, oh, at least I'm not doing tax evasion.
There you go. We look at this from all angles, as you'll see. So my interest in this topic, obviously, I run Flourish Together CIC, and I also run a thing called Pop-Up Spa and Retreats. And I'm a self-employed sole trader as a sort of social business development consultant. So I've a few bits of finance to figure out. The three businesses are all financially viable, and they've all been in profit or cleaning their face for every year they've run. So, you know, there's something to be said for this stuff. I'm interested in this for a few reasons. I'm interested in it because it helps you sleep at night if you know you're going to earn a living, and even better, creating surpluses that you can semi-predict to be able to reinvest back in communities is what, you know, my career and Flourish has always been about. So that's my interest. And you see on the panel that some of us here as entrepreneurs who are seeing this from it's a necessary evil, or it's a creative tool to invest in communities, and then we've got finance people as well. So we'll hopefully get a good mix of perspectives from all of this stuff, and look forward to hearing people's different views.
Hi, my name's Beth Nunn. I am the founder and CEO of PI, Pursuing Individual Excellence. We are an educational social enterprise who help support young people and women to become future ready. My background is I'm also an ex-teacher, Andrea. I used to be an English teacher, and I used to sort of work to support people, premium students, and closing the gap between achievement. I'm in inner city school in Manchester. So that's my background, is really sort of, I'm really interested in helping ensure that people from all backgrounds have got the same opportunities and experiences, so they can try and ensure that they can move on to whatever the next step of their future is. In terms of, we've now been going for 5 years, which is terrifying. Like, it doesn't seem like 5 years at all. And we just hit our 2-year mark, so we were sort of getting towards the end of being a startup when COVID hit. So that really made me have to think a lot more carefully about our finances, because at that point we were just starting to grow the team as well, so everything got a lot more serious a lot more quickly, and then a pandemic hit. So I think in terms of, I've had to come up with some really, I'm not a numbers person. I used to be an English teacher. I'm good with words, I'm not good with numbers, so I've had to self-train for everything. I've obviously had some support from people, but I've sort of come up with some ways that's probably like idiot-proof ways to like finance and run your company. But yeah, so that's kind of my background. And now as we're sort of moving on to I've just got some systems and stuff that we use to try and, like what Nickala said, just trying to make sure I can sleep at night. But also as well, I think it's really exciting as businesses when we come out of the other end of being a startup and we can start to like employ other people and things like that as well, which is amazing. And that's something I'm really proud of, that we are now not only providing an income for myself, but for other people as well. But that also then brings about a lot more headaches and sleepless nights and things like that too. But yeah, so love it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Louise. I run a small business called 11 Accounts Services, and we are a bookkeeping business. So the difference between bookkeeping and accounting is that we help the day-to-day of the financial admin, help you keep all the numbers together, and we like to hold your hand through navigating all of HMRC and all of the sort of things that people describe as scary, but they really shouldn't be. My background is 3 years ago I was a nurse, and I had a big career change. So also I come from that complete change in industry, starting up something new, not knowing about anything, and setting up my own business. So I can sort of relate to a lot of that with people. And I now employ staff. So again, you know, it's that big change that I can relate to.
And I'm Gurj King, and I'm here representing Further Finance. I've done some training pieces already for the how-to pieces, and I've worked with a couple of people in the room. They left me to last because I'm the trained accountant, so I'm the one that you bring a pillow and a sheet because I'm going to go to sleep when the conversation stops. But I'm a trained accountant for over 17 years. I've got I'm a management accountant, so I'm fully SEMA trained. So my background has been working across a range of different industries, including corporate, charity, and third sector. I'm also trustee for Thick Skin Theatre, currently based in Wigan as well. So I have a lot of industry experience working from a corporate side of things, which really is probably not the day-to-day piece. So it's absolutely the opposite of that. It's really strategic planning. So what I support on, what I build on, is really getting people to take the fear out of finance from the beginning or as a point of review. So if you haven't yet started the business, or if you're actually quite new, or even if you're partway in it, there's no harm at all in looking at strategy. So I look at budgets, forecasts, the planning piece, the honesty piece, making sure that everyone's actually looking ahead. The key driver to that is actually making sure the business is sustainable, because every single time I sit in a room with wonderful people like yourselves who've got these fantastic ideas and this amazing passion, everybody is a case of, I still want to be here in 5 to 10 years' time. I still want this to be benefiting the people that it needs to benefit. Perfect. As much as I come across as a villain and say, well, we can't do it that quickly, or that's not possible, that's not there. It's all designed to try and enforce that discipline. And often when that's missed, and I've seen it far too often, it can be, and it sounds really awful, but I mean, it can be critical. And it is absolutely the foundation, and it is something that people need to start with, because it's a reality. And it's never a negative. So this is always my point. You know, I've run sessions on budgets and forecasts, trying to break them down into digestible pieces, trying to make them more easier to kind of put together, and they are that simple. There's nothing to fear about it, because it's a process. It's not anything that you don't know. It's not anything that anybody here isn't qualified to do at all, because all of the information that feeds into your budgets and forecasts sits with yourselves. It doesn't sit with anybody else. So actually you already have all that information. It's simply a case of engaging in a process to make sure that it's marked out correctly in a format and logically done. And once it's there, the idea would be that the day-to-day, month-to-month review would be, you know, maintained so that you can see how you're performing against where you expect it to be, and you can start seeing those signs. So I work a lot on the idea about putting things together from the start, doing either management suite pieces, looking at 3-year, 5-year plans so that you're looking forward for that. And then that supports funding. So the whole idea is, if you want to go for funding, or you want to push for something, they want to know that you've logically thought this through. So my background for the budgets, I did the budgets and forecasts for the Royal Exchange, the Church of England in Manchester. I'm currently working on implementing Workday for the ICO, which is a whole new product. So there's support on various finance systems and the architecture around them, which then feeds into the day-to-day. So it's how you would raise a PO, go to an invoice, get the invoice paid, register a supplier, etc., and make sure that you're doing everything in a correct fashion.
Get into a bit of
Yeah.
conversations this afternoon. We didn't fully describe the format of the day, but we've got our up until about 12, we've got stay a bit of a break. We're going to switch to some conversations to get into a bit more detail and get through. So we'll get into that.
And it really isn't. I mean, I can't stress, just from my point of view, from my experience, one, how important it is, but two, how easy it is. It really is straightforward. And it, you know, from my perspective, it's about completely taking that fear out.
And we should also say, so Gurj's various training sessions he's done for us in the past are on the Flourish YouTube channel, so you can access those if you want to look at budgeting and forecasting in more detail. They're available for people to see. So yeah, first, given especially for enterprises that are starting up, in the early days there's very little time and it feels like you've got to do everything at once. So my question to the panel is, what systems would you suggest that people need to have in place at a minimum? And I'm really emphasize at a minimum in the first 1 to 2 years. Rachel, yeah.
We got a diary, and I just staple all the receipts in day by day, and that was the easiest, quickest way to do it, because you can get all these apps, they're paid, they charge you and stuff like that, and then your accountant will like it because you'll just go there and everything's in a row.
We've done a similar thing in the past where rather than a diary, I just had a file with sheets of A4. I know it all sounds very, there's loads of good apps to do this stuff, but when you're learning and you lose things, you'll say something completely different, I know, because we're now proper digital, but initially when you just like a few scraps of paper and in a file, the same thing, hole punch, staple day by day in date order, you can then start to analyze what you've spent, what you've done, and put some we've got tools, a lot of your funders that you might go to have got tools, of basic receipt logs and things like that. So certainly from recording what you're doing, receipt logs and keeping stuff together, whether it's digitally done through some of these expensing or other apps that are out there we might come to hear about. So I put it in there. You've got other things as well.
I would recommend, if you can, doing your bookkeeping for like even the first 3 months or the first 6 months, because it'll give you a really good idea of your business and the tax codes. And I didn't realize that there was like no VAT on cold sandwiches that I take away. So it'll give you an idea of where you can make a bit of profit, or like grants, I think, are taxable now. So there's little things you don't understand until you do the bookkeeping and you go, that's why there's so many ice cream businesses, or no, because there's that on it.
Really? Good stuff. I think
There is that on ice cream.
There wasn't, and then that's why there's all these cold dessert takeaway businesses. I was like, it makes sense.
But I think I was going to add in something I've got to say around my experience on this. So I've worked in the voluntary commission charity sector for over 20 years, heavily involved in sort of grant decision making back in my earlier career. I've read lots of people's applications, basic budgets. So even putting basic budgets down of what you think things might cost, and we can look at this later, but there's some simple ways of trying to work out what something's going to cost as a project and not leaving any stone unturned. It might be that some of what you have to find is in kind, pro bono, begged, still borrowed, whatever, but not leaving any costs out. It might be that you're kind of propping up, covering your travel or covering your phone costs initially until you can find other ways to make sure the income's costable. As long as you're covering every cost and looking at what am I covering, what is a grant covering, what are donations covering, what are sales or whatever else and commissions covering, you can start to break things down like that. And the bit that Gurj mentioned there, and something that we help people do quite a bit, is to help you think about what can happen with this project or this business. Is almost like scenario planning. So once you get past piloting stuff with just basic budgets and basic receipt logs and things like that, having a look at what scenario planning, so cash flow projections are something that people should get into much earlier than they actually do. And it's not scary, it is, but it's easier than it sounds. And it's just playing about with numbers. And if you can use a template or talk to one of us, we can easily help you to see, what does scenario A look like? What does scenario B, scenario C? So what's the kind of minimum that you expect might happen? What's the kind of, if things went wild, what might they look like here? And, you know, what's the middle ground? It just gives you some confidence. It gives you ways to, I remember doing this for the Old Abby Taphouse when we were applying for loan investment for them, and really stretching the boundaries, say, well, what's the capacity of this pub and what could it really do? And in addition to what you're doing now, what are some of the amazing additional things that could happen, and what might that look like if you costed it out to the wildest sense? And, you know, when you do that, you start to get a bit more ambitious, or you start to spot income streams that you might not have otherwise thought of that are actually more viable than what you initially thought, or what any funder might get you doing. So
I will say that at the moment it's so hard to cost anything because
yeah.
the prices keep changing all the time. The electricity, no one knows what's going to happen in April.
sure.
It hasn't been capped for us. We're having, like, my electricity has gone from £1,000 to £4,000. I'm thinking about turning off the oven, but the gas has gone from 13.50 bottle to 37.50 bottle, and you just have to be checking everything. But I can't give a quote now for something in 2 months' time. I just don't. Like, people ask me how much the venue is going to be high, and I don't actually know at this moment.
It's a really good point to flag up now, and our financial people might have some thoughts on that. Beth, you've probably got ideas.
Okay, so in terms of, the question was just about the first couple of years, wasn't it? So I think initially, so we're sort of a service provider, so we obviously go in and we run sessions and programs. So first and foremost, I realized that actually the biggest expense for our company is me. And I think that I was very fortunate in the fact that when I went full cold turkey and like quit my job as a teacher, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. Because I was in sort of a management position at that point, I managed to save up. Once I made the decision I was going to leave, I had about 6 months after that was still working. So I saved up and I just completely stripped back my outgoings. And I saved up like half my salary every month. So that was basically my cushion for the first year. So I could cover my bills and things like that. But I had after 1 year, I had to be able to pay myself. So I think that was kind of quite good for me. Like, it almost gave me, I think the one thing when you start out on your own, like, you've not really got any accountability. I think that's something that's really difficult. You're like, oh, I've got to, like, the only person I'm accountable is to myself. But actually that was really good. I was like, well, if I still want to do this in a year, I need to be able to pay myself. And one of my earliest conversations I had with Nickala was about the fact that you need to be able to pay yourself, and you need to be able to pay yourself well. So how are you going to make that happen? Because if in 5 years' time you're still slogging away and you're not really making any money, why would you not just go back and do the work that you were doing previously? So that's something that I've always had in mind. So I think I've always made sure I've valued myself, and I've also made sure I've always valued like the people I work with and people I sort of pay for work as well, and my employees.
And I guess on that, just having a simple invoice template. There's that many people who we on purpose, we test people's stuff out. So I remember Real Junk Food as an example, now Open Kitchen Manchester. When we first started buying food from them, they had no invoicing system. We had to give them invoices to show them how to put it together, to then pay them. So and they, you know, that was just so be it. Doesn't really matter to us, but putting that simple system in to do what you describe is important. And just a quick one that somebody mentioned on Twitter was a really good tip that I must have given them years ago, is having a separate tax account. So I know it is a process, but you've got your account that you might pay yourself into, but you definitely want to keep your 20%. If you're self-employed, initially when you first get going, everybody's setup would be different. But if you're starting out as a sole trader, before you kind of evolve into a kick, or even if you are a kick and you're paying yourself as a associate rather than employee in the first instances, we can talk about all this later, making sure that you've got an account to put your 20% for the tax man and pay yourself what you should be paying yourself, not including what you should be paying the tax man, means that you won't come a cropper when you've got to pay them.
Monzo, you can set up a business bank account with Monzo really quickly. You can't get funding to a Monzo bank account, but it has invoicing in it, so you can invoice and keep it all separate. And there's another good website called If you get Monzo banking, they have a business banking in it. You can do your invoicing from that, but you can't apply for funding with a Monzo bank account. But it's just useful. And then there's another online one called Invoice to Me, and it's a free invoice generator. And if you don't refresh your cookies, it'll track all your invoices for you. And so that's a quick one I do for freelance invoicing. Invoice to me.
We might.
I think it can just make you look a bit more professional as well.
Yeah,
That sounds like that was something that I was like we were really fortunate when I first started out. We got some startup funding from Unlimited. And one of the first things I did, I think I've spoken to a couple of people in this room about this before, I was absolutely obsessed with the fact that people didn't think I was a real business. Like, it's just me. This is what it was. It was just me, like, you know, playing at, like, going into schools and running sessions and this one. But so I tried really hard at the beginning to make sure, okay, what is our brand? And we sort of worked on that. So really basically, in fact, I got some branded pens made. And then actually, and now we do have branded pens and branded notebooks that we give out to all the young people we work with to do their
But
work.
you wrote a
within our
budget to
programs.
make sure you could pay
Yeah,
for those.
I did. Yeah, no, I did.
You
So
didn't
that
pay
was,
for them out of your
but-
pocket.
no, so that was it. So I was really fortunate that actually when I was applying
Oh,
for
you might.
Unlimited for this startup funding, I said actually what's really important to us and also is that idea of appearing professional. So I think the thing that like Rachel just said there in terms of those invoices, that I was just using a Word document, and now I look at it and I just find it quite funny that I was sending that like to schools and stuff, like, but it worked. It doesn't matter, like as long as someone's got an invoice, it
I'm
doesn't
still
matter.
sending a Word document.
Yeah.
I'm
I
proud.
think maybe yours was a
Well-
little bit more complex than what mine was at that point. But I think in terms of like initially don't worry too much about stuff. All people need is an invoice with your bank. Also, always make sure you put your bank account details
Yeah.
on an invoice, because I have not done that before. And then someone's like, we'd really like to pay you, but we don't know where to pay you to. But it's interesting what Rachel was saying before as well about in
Thank you.
terms of like getting to understand taxes, because I'm kind of the complete opposite. Like I don't understand how all of that works. Maybe because we work in really different industries, so I don't need to. But I've actively decided that that's what I pay an accountant
Delegate
for,
that.
because I don't want to end up in trouble with it.
So the first year though, you can tell your accountant what you want to do,
Yeah.
and sometimes accountants do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And we went over our VAT threshold without
Yeah.
realizing, because the way that Just Eat invoice. So we were selling food on Just Eat.
And it's unlikely that you would do that starting out, because the
Yeah.
VAT threshold is about 80 grand or something.
Yeah.
But in a
Yeah.
85, but in a pub setting, it's a different
It
kettle of
really
fish.
screwed us, because the way Just Eat invoiced us, it looked like they had given us all, say we made 10 grand on Just Eat, it looked like Just Eat had given us 10 grand and then I'd paid them 3 grand. But actually Just Eat took the 10 grand and then paid me 3 grand. But I had to pay the tax and all that. So that honestly almost bankrupted us. So if you're going to do any sales, just check the VAT. You really do need to know about the invoicing, the tax, what the impact. And I just didn't realize. And the same with, at the moment, Music Venue Trust, we all applied for loads of grants for music. Everyone's having a freak out about do they have to pay tax on the grants or not? And even the accountants don't know. So you kind of, even though you have an accountant, at the end of the day, you're the director, you're a decision maker. So that's where I've had a bit. I'm not an expert on anything, but sometimes just having a little read.
So that's so I do. I said I didn't know, but I did sort of make sure that I understood like where the tax thresholds were and things like that. But also, I guess as well, it's understanding what your service is, and because actually a lot of our work when things are in schools and things like that, a lot of them it's not tax, like there's different VAT rules around public sector money as well, which again I've had to go out and find out, and whether or not we are. So even though we've sort of grown quite a lot of an organisation, we're still not actually over the VAT threshold because of where even though our income's over that, but because of where our money comes from. But again, that's been making sure we found that out, and so it's all that kind of thing in terms of like what the VAT is. I think something else that I've done, so as Nickala was saying before, like doing budgets from the outset, I think it's quite easy. We work on a project by project basis. So I always sort of say like our outgoings go up when our income goes up, because if we're running more projects, we've got more money, and then we've got more outgoings. But I will make sure, this is one of my fun jobs for January. For Monday is at the beginning of every new project, I write a full budget for that project. So actually, what are all the outgoings going to be? Who do I need to pay?
Excel usually.
Excel is your friend. Like, and the quicker you can get to learn and use Excel, the better. But so I actually figure out, so for every month, so we're starting doing a whole new big project at a school over in Leeds, which is going to be running from now up until July. So that kind of thing will, but this is all.
And there's a good chance you'll have written that out anyway in your funding application. So you just take what you put in your funding application, put it in some sort of Excel form as what you said you were going to do, and then it's kind of, and then what changes as a result, isn't
and
it?
I think it's, for me, it's a case of, so we sort of think about the biggest thing again is staffing. So is it me? Is it paying someone else? Is it paying my other staff? Is it paying outside agencies to come in and deliver workshops? Is there room rental? Is there refreshments? And I make sure I budget in sort of like £20 per session for resources. Some sessions we don't use any resources. Some sessions we'll use £100
where you
resources.
Can creatively account to create some.
And that's it, and then that hopefully normally leaves us a margin at the end. But again, I started doing that at the beginning. I did that for so actually where is every penny coming from to pay for that stuff? And I was also very fortunate at the beginning when I went into my old high school that I taught at to do a pilot project. My old head teacher, when I went and said, this is what we're going to do. She said, okay, well, how much do we need to pay you? And I wasn't ready for that question. And I was like, oh, if I'm coming and doing a pilot. And she basically shouted at me and was like, she said, we need to pay you even just for your time, and like there's going to be cost to this, there's going to be resources. And she said, she's like, don't you dare ever go into another school and say you're going to go and do something for free, because you can't, like, that's not viable to you. So I was very fortunate that I had someone who said that to me from the outset. And now what we do is I never, even if it's a funded program, I do not go into a school and say it's a free program. I go in and tell them it's a funded program, and I make damn sure that they know how much that funding is for. So I'm like, actually, this is the value of the program that you are getting, you are not having to pay for. And I also make them sign a service level agreement, because then they have to do their side of it. But budgeting from the outset, what are my outgoings, where's it coming from? And as we've grown, I've already got that in place. So what I also do from that is actually every month, what's my salary and what pots is that coming from? What are my staff salary and what pots is that coming from? So, and that really helped as well when COVID hit, because suddenly most of our income streams dried up overnight because we couldn't go into schools. But so I could, like, actually, so what can we run, and how much in that budget every month can I pay myself? And I think that, in terms of having that really micro management of the budgets, I've done it from the outset. It made it much easier when COVID hit, and now we've grown, I've just expanded that. So actually, even every month, I have a whole spreadsheet on Excel, like which has got mine and my 3 member of staff's salaries on for every month, all against budgets. And that means that when I'm going in QuickBooks, I can sign it really easily. But I've done that since the outset, and that's made it much, much easier now.
Thanks, Beth. Let's move on to the
The balls in the corner.
no way we're going to go. So at a minimum, what systems would you recommend?
So I'll really strip it back to the absolute basics. Is recording your income and your outgoings. Make sure everything's documented, the dates, the amounts, and where it was paid from. I quite often find people go, well, I've got money in the bank. What do you mean I've not made a profit? I said, well, because you've paid that through your PayPal account. And, you know, make sure you're keeping account of everything that's coming in and out, and not just what's in the bank. Anything that you're owing, if someone sends you an invoice but you don't need to pay it till next month, that's still an expense that you've got to budget for. Making sure you're keeping a list of everything that's due out in that period, in that month, and also things that are going to come out in the future. Sort of, if you're paying an annual insurance, then you need to make sure that you're going to have the money for the next annual insurance. So to keeping records of things like that. I'm going to disagree with Rachele and say, please don't staple things. People don't like that, because we have to pull them all off. But yeah, keeping things organised in a folder, keeping all your copies of your receipts. You can keep digital copies. You don't need to have the actual physical ones anymore. And HMRC are absolutely fine with that. You do need to be keeping things for 6 years. So make sure you are keeping organised, keeping things down. Opening a separate bank account. And that's something that people don't do.
Build
quite
an extension to put all your flipping receipts in.
Opening a separate bank account. People think, oh, I'll wait till
Sorry, this is over. You know, you say you have to keep your digital for 6 years.
Yeah.
You've got them saying folders on your computer and then
Yeah.
Is it okay to just out?
Yeah.
You need to put them on the computer?
No, that's fine if you've got them in your accounting software, as long as they're somewhere and they're accessible. You do have to check with whichever software you're using. So I use Xero predominantly, and I know if somebody shuts their business, obviously you're not going to want to keep paying that subscription. So you would cancel that. If you needed access, you would just pay for that month, and then you could go back in and get it. Up to 6 years, they will keep hold of that. I don't think all softwares are the same, so you would need to check that. So it could be a case of you have to download everything off there. So yeah, so it might be worth sort of saving a backup as well in a OneDrive or something like that, depending on how you're actually managing that. But no, it is a good point.
Take pictures, email them to yourself. Give you a time and dated, and then if you ever need to go back.
Yeah, so I do that with the scan a lot
Yeah.
of things. So I help everybody help a little bit. So I don't do a lot as an accountant, but I do a bit of
Bookkeeping.
so I know that we do that. You can scan on your phone, can't you? And send it in. It's really great. And they keep them on computer system and the account was picked up, so I just wasn't sure. I don't get my head
If
into
you
it.
use things like Dropbox as well, what's Simone on that? Because this is my favourite find I ever found out in my life. Is on the Dropbox app on your phone, it will not just like take a picture, it'll properly scan things and save them as a scanned document. So if you have Dropbox, which again, there's free versions of it and there's a paid version of it as well, but like it'll actually scan things rather than just taking pictures, well, which can then sometimes be a different sort of version of it. But there's loads of software that you can use.
You know your phone's scanned now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
No,
do
but this is the
notepads,
ones- yeah.
and then you go, mine will scan it as a PDF,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is like mind blowing.
Yeah.
But I do, no, just saying, I do understand, I guess, what's happening with, with the company is just belt and braces. The idea that you've got a cloud-based system, the idea that you've got another system, but as a backup, you've always got those files available, and they're always available to you in case any glitch happens, in case something gets lost, in case somebody comes back and you go, right, I've actually got the proof, the standard piece. So it's a form of version control and just governance, and that's also key. It depends upon how people work. Yeah. Some people don't feel comfortable, and some people just aren't comfortable with technology. And if that's the case, absolutely right. I've seen